the beginning of a book called Paper Towns by John Green. It's #1 international best-selling author of The Fault in Our Stars. So it's gonna be a pretty good book. I'm a big fan of John Green. So let's get started. Prologue. The way I figure it, everyone gets a miracle. Like, I'll probably never be struck by lightning, or win a Nobel Prize, or become the dictator of a small nation in the Pacific Islands, or contract terminal ear cancer, or spontaneously combust. But if you consider all the unlikely things together, at least one of them will probably happen to each of us. I could have seen it rain frogs. I could have stepped foot on Mars. I could have been eaten by a whale. I could have married the Queen of England or survived months at sea. But my miracle is different. My miracle is this. Out of all the houses in all of the subdivisions in all of Florida, I ended up living next door to Margot Rothspielman. Our subdivision, Jefferson Park, used to be a Navy base. But then the Navy didn't need it anymore. So it returned the land to the citizens of Orlando, Florida, who decided to build a massive subdivision. Because that's what Florida does with land. My parents and Margot's parents ended up moving next door to one another, just after the first houses were built. Margot and I were 2. Before Jefferson Park was a Pleasantville, and before it was a Navy base, it belonged to an actual Jefferson. This guy, Dr. Jefferson Jefferson. Dr. Jefferson Jefferson is a school named after him in Orlando, and is also a large charitable foundation. But the fascinating and unbelievable but true thing about Dr. Jefferson is that he was not a doctor of any kind. He was just an orange juice salesman named Jefferson Jefferson. When he became rich and powerful, he went to court, made Jefferson his middle name, and then changed his first name to Doctor. Capital D, lowercase r, period. So Margot and I were 9. Our parents were friends, and so we would sometimes play together, biking past the cul-de-sac streets to Jefferson Park itself, the hub of our subdivision's wheel. I always got very nervous whenever I heard that Margot was about to show up, on account of how she was the most fantastically gorgeous creature that God had ever created. On the morning in question, she wore white shorts and a pink t-shirt that featured a green dragon breathing a fire of orange glitter. It is difficult to explain how awesome I found this teacher at the time. Margot, as always, biked standing up, her arms locked as she leaned over the handlebars, her purple sneakers a circuitous blur. It was a steam hot day in March. The sky was clear, but the air tasted acidic, like it might storm later. At the time, I fancied myself an inventor, and after we locked up our bikes and began the short walk across the park to the playground, I told Margot about an idea I had for an invention called the Ringulator. The Ringulator was a gigantic cannon that would shoot big colored rocks into a very low orbit, giving Earth the same sort of rings that Saturn has. I think this would be a fine idea, but it turns out that building a cannon that can shoot boulders into a low orbit is fairly complicated. I'd been in this park so many times before that it was mapped in my mind, so there were only a few steps inside when I began to sense that the world was out of order, even though I couldn't immediately figure out what was different. Quentin, Margot said quietly, calmly. She was pointing, and then I realized what that was. There was a live oak a few feet ahead of us, thick and gnarled and ancient looking. This was not new. The playground on our right, not new either. But now, a guy wearing a gray suit slumped against the trunk of an oak tree, not moving. This was new. He was encircled by blood. A half-dried fountain of it poured out of his mouth. The mouth opened in a way the mouths generally shouldn't be. Flies had rest on his pale forehead. "He's dead," Margaret said, as if I couldn't tell. I took 2 small steps backwards. I remember thinking that if I made any sudden movements, he might wake up and attack me. Maybe he was a zombie. I knew zombies weren't real, but he looked like a zombie. As I took those 2 steps back, Margot took 2 equally small and quiet steps forward. His eyes are open, she said. We gotta go home, I said. I thought you closed your eyes when you died, she said. Margot, we gotta go home and tell. She took another step. She was close enough to reach out and touch his foot. What do you think happened to him? She asked. Maybe it was drugs or something. I didn't want to leave Margot alone with the dead guy who might be an attack zombie, but I also didn't care to stand around and chat about the circumstances of his demise. I gathered my courage and stepped forward to take her hand. Margot, we gotta go right now. Okay, yeah, she said. We ran to our bikes, my stomach churning with something that it felt exactly like excitement, but wasn't. We got on our bikes, and I let her go in front of me because I was crying and I didn't want her to see. I could see blood on the soles of her purple sneakers. His blood. The dead guy's blood. And then we were back home in our separate houses. My parents called 911, and I heard sirens in the distance and asked to see the fire trucks, but my mom said no. Then I took a nap. Both my parents are therapists, which means that I am really goddamn well adjusted. So when I woke up, I had a long conversation with my mom about the cycle of life, and how death is a part of life, but not a part of life I needed to be particularly concerned about at the age of mine, and I felt better. Honestly, I never worried about it much, which is saying something because I can do some worrying. Here's the thing. I found a dead guy. Little adorable 9-year-old me, and my even littler and more adorable playdate found a guy with the blood pouring out of his mouth, and that blood was on her little adorable sneakers as we biked home. It's all very dramatic and everything. But so what? I didn't know the guy. People I don't know die all the time. If I had a nervous breakdown every time something awful happened in the world, I'd be crazier than a shithouse rat. That night, I went into my room at 9 o'clock to go to bed, because 9 o'clock was my bedtime. My mom tucked me in. She told me she loved me, and I said, see you tomorrow. And she said, see you tomorrow. And then she turned out the lights and closed the door almost all the way. As I turned on my side, I saw Margot Ross Spielman standing outside my window, her face almost pressed against the screen. I got up and opened the window, but the screen stayed between us, pixelating her. I did an investigation, she said, quite seriously. Even up close, the screen broke her face apart, but I couldn't tell what she was holding. But I could tell she was holding a little notebook and a pencil with teeth marks around the eraser. She glanced down at her notes. Miss Feldman from over on Jefferson Court said his name was Robert Joyner. She told me he lived on Jefferson Road in one of those condos on top of the grocery store. So I went over there, and there were a bunch of policemen, and one of them asked if I worked for the school newspaper. I said our school didn't have a paper. He said as long as I wasn't a journalist, he would answer my questions. He said Robert Joyner was a 36-year-old lawyer. They wouldn't let me in the apartment, but a lady named Juana Alvarez now lives next door to him. And I got into her apartment by asking if I could borrow a cup of sugar, and then she said that Robert Joyner had killed himself with a gun. And then I asked why, and then she told me that he was getting a divorce and was sad about it. She stopped then, and I looked at her, face gray in moonlight and split into 1,000 little pieces by the weave of the window screen. Her wide, round eyes flitted back and forth from her notebook to me. Lots of people get divorces and don't kill themselves, I said. I know, she said, excitement in her voice. That's what I told Juanita Alvarez. And she said, Margot flipped through the notebook. She said Mr. Joyner was troubled, and then I asked what she meant. And she told me that he should have... She told me that we should have just prayed for him. And then I needed to take the sugar to my mom, and I said forget the sugar and left. I said nothing again. I just wanted to tell her to keep talking. That small voice, tense with excitement of almost knowing things, making me feel like something important was happening to me. I think I maybe know why, she finally said. Why? Maybe all the strings inside him broke, she said. While I tried to think of something to say in answer to that, I reached forward and pressed the lock of the window screen between us, dislodging it from the window. I placed the screen on the floor, but she didn't give me a chance to speak. Before I could sit back down, she just raised her voice up and toward me. and whispered back, "Shut the window." So I did. I thought she would leave, but she just stood there, watching me. I waved at her and smiled, but her eyes seemed fixed on something behind me, something monstrous that had already drained the blood from her face. I felt too afraid to turn around and see, but there was nothing to be behind me, of course, except maybe the dead guy. I stopped waving. My head was level with hers, and we stared at each other from opposite sides of the glass. I don't remember how it ended, if I went to bed or if she did. In my memory, it doesn't end. We just stay there, looking at each other forever. Margaret always loved mysteries, and in everything that came afterward, I would never stop thinking that one day, maybe she loved mysteries so much that she became one. Part 1. The Strings. Chapter 1. The longest day of my life began tardily. I woke up late, too long into the shower, and ended up having to enjoy my breakfast in the passenger seat of my mom's minivan at 7:17, that Wednesday morning. I usually got a ride to school with my best friend, Ben Starling, but Ben had gone to school on time, making him useless to me. On time for us was 30 minutes before school actually started, because the half hour before the first bell was the highlight of our social calendars, standing outside the door that led into the band room and just talking. Most of my friends were in band, and most of my free time during school was spent within 20 feet of the band room, but I was not in band, because I suffer from the kind of tone deafness that is generally associated with actual deafness. I was going to be 20 minutes late, which technically meant that I would still be 10 minutes early for school itself. As she drove, Mom was asking me about classes and finals and prom. I don't believe in prom, I reminded her as she rounded the corner. I expertly angled my raisin bran to accommodate the G-forces I'd done this before. Well, there's no harm in going with a friend. I'm sure you could ask Cassie Heine. And I could have asked Cassie Heine, who was actually perfectly nice and pleasant and cute, despite having a fantastically unfortunate last name. It's not just that I don't like prom. It's just that I don't like people who like prom. I explained, although this was, in point of fact, untrue. Ben was absolutely gaga over the idea of going. Mom turned into school, and I held the mostly empty bowl with both hands as we drove over a speed bump. I glanced over at the senior parking lot. Margot Rothspielman's silver Honda was parked in its usual spot. Mom pulled the minivan into a cul-de-sac outside the band room and kissed me on the cheek. I could see Ben and my other friends standing in a semicircle. I walked up to them, and the half-circle effortlessly expanded to include me. They were talking about my ex-girlfriend Susie Chung, who played cello and was apparently creating quite a stir by dating a baseball player named Taddy Mack. Whether this was his given name, I did not know, but at any rate, Susie had decided to go to prom with Taddy. Another casualty. "Bro," said Ben, standing across from me. He nodded his head and turned around. I followed him out of the circle and through the door. A small, olive-skinned creature who had hit puberty but never hit it very hard. Ben had been my best friend since 5th grade, when we had both finally owned up to the fact that neither of us was likely to attract anyone else as a best friend. Plus, he tried hard, and I liked that, most of the time. "How you doing?" I asked. We were safely inside, everyone else's conversations making ours inaudible. "Radar is going to prom," he said morosely. Radar was our other best friend. We called him Radar because he looked like a little I can't read, guy called Radar on his own TV show. On this old TV show, MASH, except 1. The radar wasn't black, and 2. At some point after the nicknaming, our radar grew about 6 inches and started wearing contacts, so I suppose that 3, he didn't actually look like the guy from MASH at all. But 4, with 3.5 weeks left of high school, we weren't very well going to re-nickname him. "That girl Angela?" I asked. Radar never told us anything about his love life, but he did not dissuade from frequent speculation. Oh my gosh, I can't read, I'm sorry. Ben nodded, and he said, "You know my big plan to ask a fresh bunny to prom, because they're the only girls who don't know the Bloody Ben story?" I nodded. "Well," Ben said, "this morning some darling little 9th grade honey bunny came up to me and asked if I was Bloody Ben, and I began to explain that it was a kidney infection, and she giggled and ran away. So that's out." In 10th grade, Ben was hospitalized for a kidney infection, but Beckett Arrington, Margot's best friend, started a rumor that the real reason he had blood in his urine was due to chronic masturbation. Despite its medical implausibility, this story had haunted Ben ever since. That sucks, I said. Ben started outlining plans for finding a date, but I was only half listening, because through the thickening mass of humanity crowding the hallway, I could see Margot Ross Spielman. She was next to her locker, standing beside her boyfriend, Jace. She wore a white skirt to her knees and a blueprint top. I could see her collarbone. She was laughing at something hysterical. Her shoulders bent forward, her big eyes crinkling in the corners, her mouth open wide. But it didn't seem to be anything Jason said, because she was looking away from him, across the hallway to a bank of lockers. I followed her eyes and saw Becca Arrington, draped all over some basketball players, like she was an ornament and he was a Christmas tree. I smiled at Margot, even though I knew she couldn't see me. Bro, you should hit that. Forget about Jace. God, that one is candy-coated honey bunny. As we walked, I kept taking glances at her through the crowd. Quick snapshots. A photographic series entitled Perfection Stands Still While Mortals Walk Past. As I got closer, I thought maybe she wasn't laughing at all. Maybe she received a surprise gift or something. She couldn't seem to close her mouth. Yeah, I said to Ben, still not listening, still trying to see as much of her as I could without being too obvious. It wasn't even that she was so pretty. She was just so awesome, in the literal sense. And then we were too far past her, so many people walking behind her and me. And I never even got close enough to hear her or speak or understand whatever the hilarious surprise had been. Ben shook his head because he had seen me see her 1,000 times, and he was used to it. Honestly, she's hot, but she's not that hot. You know who's seriously hot? Who? I asked. Lacey, he said, who was Margot's other best friend. Also, your mom. Bro, I saw your mom kiss you on the cheek this morning, and forgive me, but I swear to God, I was like, man, I wish I was cute. And also, I wish my cheeks had penises. Whoa. I know, right? I elbowed him in the ribs, but I was thinking about Margot because she was the only legend who lived next door to me. Margot Roth Spielman, whose six-syllable name was often spoken in its entirety with a kind of quiet reverence. Margot Roth Spielman, whose stories of epic adventures would blow through the school like a summer storm. An old guy living in a broken-down house in Hot Coffee, Mississippi, taught Margot how to play the guitar. Margot Roth Spielman, who spent 3 days traveling with the circus. They thought she had potential in trapeze. Margot Roth Spielman, who drank a cup of herbal tea with the millionaires backstage after his concert in St. Louis while they drank whiskey. Margot Roth Spielman, who got into that concert by telling the bouncer that she was the bassist's girlfriend, and they didn't recognize her. And come on, guys, seriously, my name is Margot Roth Spielman, and if you go back there and ask the bassist to take one look at me, he will tell you that I am either his girlfriend or he wishes I was. And then the bouncer did so, and the bassist said, yeah, that's my girlfriend, let her in the show. And later the bassist wanted to hook up with her, and she rejected the bassist from the millionaires. The stories, when they were shared, inevitably ended with, I mean, can you believe it? We often could not. But they always proved true. And then we were at our lockers. Radar was leaning up against Ben's locker, typing in a handheld device. So you're going to prom, I said to him. He looked up and then looked back down. I'm de-vandalizing the ominous article about a former Prime Minister of France. Last night, someone deleted the entire entry and then replaced it with the sentence, Jacques Chirac is a gay, which, as it happens, is incorrect both factually and grammatically. Radar is a big-time editor of his online user-created reference source called Omnisciary. His whole life is devoted to the maintenance and well-being of Omnisciary. This was one of several reasons why his having a prom date was somewhat surprising. So you're going to prom, I repeated. Sorry, he said without looking up. It was a well-known fact that I was opposed to prom. Absolutely nothing about any of it appealed to me. Not slow dancing, not fast dancing, not the dresses, and certainly not the rented tuxedos. Renting a tuxedo seemed to be an excellent way to contract some hideous disease from its previous tenant. I did not aspire to become the world's only virgin with pubic lice. Bro, Ben said to Radar. The fresh honeys know about the Bloody Blend story. Radar put the handheld device away and nodded sympathetically. So, anyway, Ben continued, my 2 remaining strategies are either to purchase a prom date on the internet or fly to Missouri and kidnap some nice corn-fed little honey bunny. I tried telling Ben that honey bunny sounded more sexist and lame than retro cool, but he refused to abandon the practice. He called his own mother a honey bunny. There was no fixing him. I'll ask Angela if she knows anybody, Radar said, although getting you a date to prom will be harder than turning lead into gold. Getting you a date to prom is so hard that the hypothetical idea itself is actually used to cut diamonds, I added. Radar tapped a locker twice with his fist to express his approval, and then came back with another. Ben, getting you a prom date to prom is so hard that the American government believes the problem cannot be solved with diplomacy, but will instead require force. I was trying to think of another one, when all 3 simultaneously saw the human-shaped container of anabolic steroids known as Chuck Parson, walking towards us with some intent. Chuck Parson did not participate in organized sports, because to do so would distract him from the larger goal of his life, to one day be convicted of homicide. Hey, faggots, he called. Chuck, I answered, as friendly as I could muster. Chuck hadn't given us any serious trouble in a couple years. Someone in Cool Kid Land laid down the edict that we were to be left alone, so it was a little unusual for him to talk to us. Maybe because I spoke, and maybe because not, he slammed his hands against the locker on the other side of me, and leaned in close enough for me to contemplate his toothpaste brand. What do you know about Margot and Jace? I said. I thought of everything I knew about them. Jace was Margot, Ross Spielman's first and only serious boyfriend. They began dating at the tail end of last year. They were both going to University of Florida next year. Jace got a baseball scholarship there. He was never over at her house, except to pick her up. She acted as if she liked him all that much, but then she never acted as if she liked anyone at all that much. Nothing, I said finally. Don't shit me around, he growled. I barely even know her, I said, which had become true. He considered my answer for a minute. I tried hard to stare at his close-set eyes. He nodded very slightly, pushed off the lockers, and walked away to attend his first period class, the care and feeding of pictorial muscles. The second bell rang, 1 minute to class. Radar and I had calc. Ben had, fine at mathematics. The classrooms were adjacent. We walked down them together, the 3 of us in a row, trusting the tide of classmates would part enough to let us by, and it did. I said, getting you a date to prom is so hard that 1,000... I'll turn the page. Monkeys typing in 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years would never type once. I will go to prom with Ben. Ben could not resist tearing himself apart. My mom's prospects are so poor that My prom prospects are so poor that Q's grandma turned me down. She said she was waiting on Radar to ask her. Radar nodded his head slowly. It's true, Q. Your grandma loves the brothers. It was so pathetically easy to forget about Chuck to talk about prom, even though I didn't give a shit about prom. Such was life that morning. Nothing really mattered that much. Not the good things and not the bad ones. We were in the business of mutual amusement, and we were reasonably prosperous. I spent the next 3 hours in classrooms, trying not to look at the clocks above the various blackboards, and then looking at the clocks, and being amazed that only a few minutes had passed since I last looked at the clock. I had nearly 4 years of experience looking at these clocks, but their sluggishness never ceased to surprise. If I am ever told that I have one day to live, I will head straight for the hollowed halls of Winter Park High School, where a day has been known to last 1,000 years. but it did as much as it felt like the third period of physics would have never ended. It did, and then I was in the cafeteria with Ben. Radar had fifth period lunch with most of our other friends, so Ben and I generally sat together alone, a couple seats between us, and a group of drama kids we knew. Today we were both eating many pepperoni pizzas. Pizza's good, I said. He nodded distractedly. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing, he said through a mouthful of pizza. He swallowed. I know you think it's dumb, but I want to go to prom. 1, I do think it's dumb. 2, if you want to go, just go. 3, if I'm not mistaken, you haven't asked anyone. I asked Cassie Heine during math. I wrote her a note. I raised my eyebrows questioningly. Ben reached into his shorts and slid a heavily folded piece of paper to me. I flattened it out. Ben, I'd love to go to prom with you, but I'm already going with Frank. Sorry. I refolded it and slid it back across the table. I could remember playing paper football on these tables. That sucks, I said. Yeah, whatever. The walls of sound felt like they were closing in on us, and we were silent for a while, and then Ben looked at me very seriously and said, I'm going to get so much play in college. I'm going to be in the Guinness Book of World Records under the category Most Honey Buns Ever Pleased. I laughed. I was thinking about how Radar's parents were actually in the Guinness World Record book when I noticed a pretty African-American girl with spiky little dreads standing above us. It took me a moment to realize the girl was Angela, Radar's, I guess, girlfriend. Hi, she said to me. Hey, I said. I'd had classes with Angela, and I knew her a little, but we didn't say hello in the hallway or anything. I motioned for her to sit. She scooted a chair in the head of the table. I figured that you guys would probably know Marcus better than anyone, she said, using Radar's real name. She leaned towards us, her elbows on the table. It's a shitty job, but someone's got to do it, Ben answered, smiling. Do you think he's, embarrassed of me? Ben laughed. What? No, he said. Technically, I added, you should be embarrassed of him. She rolled her eyes, smiling, a girl accustomed to compliments. But he's, never invited me to hang out with you. Oh, I said, getting it finally. That's because he's embarrassed of us. She laughed. You seem pretty normal. You've never seen Ben snort Sprite up his nose and spit it out of his mouth, I said. I look like a demented carbonated fountain, he deadpanned. But really, you wouldn't worry? I mean, we've been dating for 5 weeks, and he's never taken me to his house. Ben and I exchanged a knowing glance, and then I scrunched up my face to suppress laughter. What? She asked. Nothing, I said. Honestly, Angela, if he was forcing you to hang out with us and taking you to his house all the time, then it would definitely mean he didn't like you. Ben fished. Are his parents weird? I struggled with how to answer that question. No, they're cool. They're just kind of overprotective, I guess. Yeah, overprotective, Ben agreed a little too quickly. She smiled and then got up, saying that she had to go say hi to someone before lunch was over. Ben waited until she was gone to say anything. That girl is awesome, Ben said. I know, I answered. I wonder if we can replace Radar with her. She's probably not that good with computers, though. We need someone who's good at computers. Plus, I bet she sucks at Resurrection, which was our favorite video game. By the way, Ben added, nice call saying that Radar's folks are overprotective. Well, it's not my place to tell her, I said. I wonder how long it'll be till she gets to meet the Team Radar Resistance in the museum. Ben smiled. The period was almost over, so Ben and I got up and put our trays onto the conveyor belt. The very same one that Chuck Parson had thrown me into on freshman year, sending me into the terrifying netherworld of the Winter Park's dishwashing corps. We walked over to the Radar's locker, and we were standing there in the race when he raced up just after the first bell. I decided during government that I would actually literally suck donkey balls if I could skip that class for the rest of the semester, he said. You can learn a lot about government from donkey balls, I said. Hey, speaking of reasons you wish you had fourth period lunch, we just dined with Angela. Ben smirked at Radar and said, yeah, she wants to know why she's never been to your house. Radar exhaled a long breath as he spun the combination to open his locker. He breathed for so long that I thought he might pass out. crap," he finally said. "Are you embarrassed about something?" I asked, smiling. "Shut up," he answered, poking his elbow into my gut. "You live in a lovely home," I said. "Seriously, bro," added Ben. "She's a really nice girl. I don't see why you can't introduce you to your parents and show her Casa Radar." Radar threw his books into his locker and shut it. The din of conversation around us quieted just a bit as he turned his eyes toward the heavens and shouted, "It's not my fault that my parents own the world's largest collection of black Santas," I'd heard Radar say. I've heard Radar say the world's largest collection of black Santas perhaps 1,000 times in my life. It never became any less funny to me. But he wasn't kidding. I remember the first time I visited. I was maybe 13. It was spring, many months past Christmas, and yet black Santas lined the windowsills. Paper cutouts of black Santas hung from the stairway banister. Black Santa candles adorned the dining room table. A black Santa oil painting hung above the mantel, which was itself lined with black Santa figurines. They had a black Santa Pez dispenser purchased from Namibia, the light-up plastic black Santa that stood on their postage-stamp front yard from Thanksgiving to New Year's spent the rest of the year proudly keeping watch in the corner of the guest bathroom. A bathroom with homemade black Santa wallpaper created with paint and Santa-shaped sponge. In every room, save Radar's, their home was awash in black Santa daub. Plaster and plastic and marble and clay and wood and resin and cloth in total. Radar's parents owned more than 1,200 black Santas of various sorts. As a plaque beside their front door proclaimed, Radar's house was officially registered Santa landmark, according to the Society of Christmas. "You just gotta tell her, man," I said. "You gotta say, 'Angela, I really like you, but there's something you need to know. When we go to my house and hook up, we'll be watched by the 2,400 eyes of 1,200 black Santas.'" Radar ran a hand through his buzz cut and shook his head. "Yeah, I don't think I'll actually put it like that, but I'll deal with it. I head off to the government. Then to an elective about video game design. I watched clocks through 2 more classes, and then finally the relief radiated out through my chest. When I was finished, the end of the day, like a dry run for our graduation less than a month away. I went home. I ate 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and as an early dinner. I watched poker on TV. My parents came home at 6, hugged each other and hugged me. We ate macaroni casserole as proper dinner. They asked me about school. They asked me about prom. They marveled about what a wonderful job they'd done raising me. They told me about their days dealing with people who had been raised less brilliantly. They went to watch TV. I went to my room and checked my email. I wrote a little bit about the Great Gatsby for English. I read some of the Federalist papers as an early prep for my government final. I instant messaged with Ben, and then Radar came online. It was in our conversation he used the phrase, "the world's largest collection of black Santas," 4 times, and I laughed each time. I told him I was happy for him, having a girlfriend, but he said it would be a great summer. I agreed. It was May 5th, but it didn't have to be. My days had pleasant identicalness about them. I had always liked that. I liked routine. I liked being bored. I didn't want to, but I did, and so May 5th could have just been any day, until just before midnight, when Margaret Rath-Spiegelman slid open my screenless bedroom window for the first time since telling me to close it 9 years before.